every reptile YouTuber has done a top 5 beginner or entry-level snake or reptile video, and I'm no exception. The only difference is I actually found it to be a little bit subpar and actually deleted it entirely off the YouTube page until someone who watched the intermediate top 5 snake video went, I can't find it. So, with that out of the way, I'm now 2 years later with a little bit better idea of what it means to be a beginner or entry level snake. Going to do a new top 5 video. So when most people think of what's the best beginner pet snake, they usually think of, oh, it's a ball python or something similar, where it's a very easy, docile snake. However, I think there are a couple different factors that go into what the best entry level snake is as far as that goes, which includes cost, docile or mild temperament, as well as hardiness and ease of care of their husbandry requirements. So all the ones that I'm going to talk about today, all I feel fit those categories very well. I'm going to have some easy softball ones that you're probably expecting, and then maybe a couple that you haven't quite expected. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'll knock out the first one easy. Obviously, that's the corn snake. And I honestly feel that a corn snake is the best beginner pet snake for anybody getting into it. But I'm going to throw an asterisk in there. So, corn snakes are a North American rat snake species, Pantheropus guttatus. They're found normally, essentially east of the Mississippi and from Miami all the way up the East Coast in different compartmentalized, different habitats, all the way up even into New Jersey. They're a moderate-sized snake, usually getting no longer than 4.5 feet long. They're fairly slender-bodied, and they're very easy to take care of. I will say, though, that this is my little asterisk, that I think a yearling or older are the best ones. The little ones can be a little squirmy and are definitely little escape artists. So someone who's looking to get a very first or entry-level pet reptile who wants something that's going to move but not a whole lot, that's very easy to handle, is a little bit more inexpensive as far as their care requirements go, that are very hardy, they can take high and low temperatures and humidities. I think a yearling to an adult corn snake that obviously come in a bunch of different patterns and morphs, from people who want just like normal looking one all the way up to like palmettos and scaleless, like all over the place. I personally have a couple different corn snakes. I'm never going to breed them. I just think they are amazing and really cool, interesting animals that make great ambassadors as well. Next up on the list is another pretty familiar one for most people, and that is milk snakes. Now, there's actually a bunch of different species of milk snakes out there. They're very similar to king snakes, and most milk snakes actually belong to the species Lampropeltis triangulum. And then there's a bunch of the different some species up there, Nelsons, Puebloans, Hondurans, all the different fun ones like that. They are, again, very similar to the king snakes, and they do make very easy and good beginner pets. But I want to talk a little bit about the milk snakes. So milk snakes, all the different ones, essentially occupy the regions of kind of like middle laterally of the United States all the way down into parts of South America. And they all are very easy to keep, and they all have a bunch of similarities, but they all differ in different certain ways. They get their name milk snake from the fact that, for whatever reason, when Europeans first came to the New World and settled in, they thought that milk snakes would actually crawl in at night into their barns and actually grab onto cow udders and drink milk. But in reality, the reason why is that they are attracted to the rodents that come along with human habitation. Wherever there's people, rodents follow, and what eats rodents? Milk and king snakes. Now, these guys are a natural mimic of the very venomous elapid coral snake that there are several different species all over the world, and there's a couple here in the United States. That red, yellow, black patterning is a warning sign to predators, and milk snakes mimic that through evolutionary terms to also hopefully deter predators. This girl, Iota here, is a tangerine albino Honduran milk snake. So because of that albino and the tangerine, she doesn't have the black or yellow. She's more of a just pure red and white candy cane looking snake. Now these guys, again, do vary in different ways. So the smallest of them is a subset of the Central Plains milk snake called the New Mexico milk snake that typically don't exceed more than 2 feet, and the largest of which are like the Andean and the black milk snakes that can sometimes exceed 6 feet in length. They're all very hardy. Their all care is very simple. They just need a little bit of tweaking here and there. So for instance, this girl Iota here, being a Honduran milk snake, and along with like the black milk snakes, they need a little bit more humidity for them versus the Puebloan or the Nelson's milk snakes, or that require a little bit drier temperatures and maybe a little bit of a higher heat spot. But overall, very simple to care for, usually a fairly docile animal. The only difference being between mainly the milk snakes and king snakes and then the corn snakes previously is that these guys typically have a little bit more of a higher prey drive, which can be a little intimidating for some people. But overall, their personalities, as you can see with Iota here, are very docile as a whole, very hardy animals, widely available in different sizes and different morphs. Very easy, great first-time or entry-level pet snake. Next up are ones that everybody forgets about, including me, until I actually got one, and that is the children's and spotted pythons of Australia. They actually belong to the smallest genus of pythons in the world, and that's called Antaresia, which is actually named after a constellation, so that's why they're sometimes called stellar pythons. Now, these guys are kind of like North American garter snakes. They are a non-venomous python species, smallest in the world, and there's 2 of them that we're talking about, the children's and the spotteds, and they essentially occupy the entire northeastern and southern parts of the island/continent of Australia, and then a little bit inwards. There's another one in there called the pygmy python, but those are a little bit more difficult to take care of, so we're not going to talk about them. We're mostly talking about the children's and the spotteds. Now, contrary to what a lot of people think, the children's pythons aren't named children's because they're great for kids to handle, albeit they certainly are 99% of the time. They're actually named after a British zoologist who worked at the British Museum in London during the time of their newly rediscovered history of Europeans. The spotted pythons get their name for a pretty obvious reason. They're spotted. These guys are very small, as I said before. They typically do not exceed more than about 3 feet in length, with spotteds generally being a little bit larger. Children's do have a fair amount of variation when it comes to color between these Stimson's variety as well as a couple different localities. They can range basically from like a creamy yellow, sandy white all the way to like an orange red. The spotted pythons, they typically in their natural morph don't actually vary as much, but there are quite a few different morphs, mostly in Australia, but here in the United States and in parts of Europe, we do have a couple different ones, including patternless and granted. In Australia, there's also several different albinos and melanistic, and I think there's a pied in there too. Overall, because of how small they are, they don't need nearly as large enclosures as even, say, probably a corn snake or a lot of the milk snakes because they are so small. Supposedly, they actually can do very well housed together. I've done a fair bit of research into them, and it seems like a lot of the Aussies actually keep them in small groups. And once well established, they have amazing prey drives and are very easily handled. Great species of snakes, often overlooked. And I 100% think that these guys make great entry-level animals because in the range that they have across most of Australia, they also deal with a lot of different temperature and humidity zones, which makes them a little bit more bulletproof as far as husbandry goes as well. This next one is one that I'm really going to throw some people and they might get mad at me about. But hear me out. The Russian rat snake, sometimes called the Amur or the Siberian rat snake. Now, this is a species of old world rat snake, part of the genus Elaphey, that occupy parts of northern China, parts of Russia, and a little bit of Mongolia. That's why we call them the Russian rat snakes, even though most of their range is not in Russia, it's actually in China, but I digress. This species of old world or Asian rat snake is actually one of the larger species, sometimes getting up to 6 feet long. Now, that sounds a little bit intimidating. They're actually a very slender-bodied animal, and the number one reason why I included them on this list is their docility. These are very placid, mild-tempered snakes to where they almost never bite. Multiple people have always come and told me that they've never once, even super flighty, squirmy, wild-caught import Russian rat snakes never want to bite. They always want to run or squirm, and once well established, they are very docile, very curious, and very comfortable animals. In fact, a lot of the times they are out during the middle of the day, unlike a lot of like the ball pythons and corn snakes that are out mostly in the evening. When you're awake, they're awake. And they're perfectly fine just hanging out in front of people instead of away in a hide like a lot of different snakes do. They're a cooler weather snake coming from northern China and Russia, so you don't even need to make them as hot. The only thing about that versus the other ones is that you will need a little bit of a larger enclosure versus like a corn snake or most of the milk snakes. The last one on the list is also another one that gets forgotten a lot about, but I argue as equally as good of a beginner snake as the corn snakes, if not more so, and that is the African house snakes. Now, this African house snakes belongs to a small genus of snakes. There's a few different ones in there. Here in the United States, we mostly only really work with two different ones, the capes and the browns, but they actually belong to a larger family of colubrids that includes a whole bunch of other different species, over 30 of them in general. Now, these ones occupy, naturally in the wild, most of sub-Saharan Africa. So where the big Saharan desert ends and where the range of like the ball pythons and stuff are, that's also where the house snakes inhabit, but they actually occupy much more of the continent of Africa than the ball pythons or more famous snakes do. These guys are called house snakes because of how often they are found right next to or near human dwellings and habitation. And just like the case of the milk snakes, that is because they are attracted to the rodents that are attracted by the people. People, rodents, snakes. That's how it's always worked all throughout history, all over the world. Now, these guys are a really cool species of snake. Very similar to like the pythons of the spotted pythons of Australia and the garter snakes of North America. These guys are a very common, small, docile species of colubrid that are found all over the place. Now, as I said before, there's really two that we mostly deal with: the capes that usually end up being the darker or the more olive-looking ones, and then the browns that typically have more of the morphs. Either way, they're actually very sexually dimorphic, not nearly as much as like the green anacondas. And what that means is that there's a difference physically between males and females. Like the green anacondas, females are those giant, huge ones. Males are typically much smaller, although they can still get 9+ feet. With the house snakes, typically the males usually only sit around 1.5 to 2 feet long. The females usually being closer to that 3-foot range. So a very small, manageable size snake. They're also fairly docile, that are very reluctant to bite. They often just want to get away. Another plus in the house snake category. There's several morphs, as I said before, the melanistics, the olives, the browns, there's T positives, there's T negatives. So morphs, so that's attractive to people who are interested in that and want to breed them. There's that as well. They also are great breeders and often will double clutch and with very, very rarely have any issues with that. So avid breeders, another one in there too. And because of all the different places that they exist, as long as you keep them warm and dry, give them a nice little humid hide, they work very well and are very easy to be kept. And I will say that a lot of them do come in as wild imports and they can be a little bit more flighty. But if you spend just a tiny little bit more money, we're talking still less than $300, which I know sounds daunting, especially this time of year. The captive-born animals, and this goes with 99% of animals, captive-born animals typically are healthier, they are calmer, and more used to human interactions than their wild-caught or farm-raised animals in general. So if you get a captive-born African house snake, a brown, a T-positive, a black, in a nice, easy setup, give them a couple places to hide, a nice little warm spot, very easy, very simple. So there we go. There's what I believe, due to personality, temperament, ease, price, the husbandry requirements, I feel that most milk snakes, corn snakes, African house snakes, Russian rat snakes, and spotted and children's pythons, I think are 5 very good choices for an entry-level or beginner snake. Does that mean I didn't include ball pythons? The only reason why I didn't, because a lot of people will say that, is just because of the initial setup requirements and idea of how their husbandry has to do is a little bit of a vertical step up from these different choices. And so that's why I didn't include ball pythons in this video. Do I think the ball pythons make a great pet? Absolutely. But there's a difference between a good pet and a good entry-level and beginner pet when it comes to the ease of husbandry and the ease of handling. That's why I went with those instead. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. The person who called me out about not being able to find the beginner one, hopefully this is a little bit better than the one that you would have found in general, as well as I went back and looked at that intermediate level snake video. Not really a fan. I somehow included Burmese pythons on that list. So let me know if you want to see me redo and come up with a better, not only production, but a better list of species for an intermediate level of pet snake, and I might just do it anyway because that bothers me a little bit. Let me know down in the comments, or anything else you would love to see or hear me talk about or see. I have a whole playlist of other top 5 things between good to intermediate levels, as well as things you may not have heard of, all sorts of different fun stuff. If you want to check that playlist out, lets YouTube know that I exist, helps my click-through rate, helps me do what I want to do and be able to educate and work with everybody about learning about these amazing group of animals. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Please like and subscribe if you can. Hit that bell notification so you know when I post a bunch of stuff. I'm going to have a whole bunch of new content coming out very soon. And again, hope everyone's having a great day, and we'll check you next time.